I'm Bill Murphy. I'm the interviewer, and I'm affiliated with the Carroll County Toastmasters. And I'll be interviewing Adrian Guadalupe Gamboa. And today's date is May the 21st, 2016, and we're at the Community Media Center in Westminster, Maryland. Adrian, where and when were you born?
I was born in Chicago, Illinois, back in on July 25th, 1970. I'm the son of Mexican immigrants that settled in Chicago around the mid-50s. Lived part of my life there. I left when I was 10. I was raised by my grandparents in Mexico for about almost a decade. And so after prep school, I came back, transferred all my paperwork from my high school equivalency, and shipped out to boot camp.
Who are your parents and what were their occupations?
As I mentioned before, Mexican immigrants that came from the state of Nuevo León, Mexico, and they were laborers. They worked their way through Texas, all the way into Illinois, through picking cottons. And then my grandfather settled in a company for 30-something odd years, retired, and then they returned back to their hometown. By then, everybody had their families, my mother, their sisters, and her only brother, and kind of scattered along the whole state of Illinois.
Who were your siblings, the names and genders, and which, if any, served in the military?
I have two half-brothers and a half-sister. On my mother's side, my brother Santos Ramirez, he works for a Xfinity company in Tennessee, assembly line. And my brother Juan Gamboa, he's a prison guard in Texas. And my sister works for a big furniture company. She has 2 daughters, my 2 nieces that I love so much, and my brother has 1 child, Diego, my nephew.
What were you doing before you entered the service, Adrian?
Well, that's a good question. When I left as a kid from Chicago, there were several reasons why I left, some good, some bad, but I already knew my mother used to take me as a child to her friend's house that had two sons that were Marines. And they always used to discipline me, but the image, the impact that they made when I saw them in that uniform, I knew I was going to be a Marine. So every summer for 10 years, my grandparents flew me back to Chicago to see my mother and my father. And I went to the recruiter's office and I got the updated posters, the updated stickers, and so I always got motivated, wishing I could graduate high school right there and then. And that's when it did happen in the summer of '88, and found myself back in Chicago late '88.
In which branch of the military did you serve?
Well, without a doubt, I always wanted to be a Marine, and I want to be enlisted. And I always asked the recruiter what was the highest rank. I said, one day I'll get there, and all I knew it was the rank with the star, and back then as a kid.
You say you enlisted or you were drafted?
I enlisted. Yes.
If you enlisted, why did you choose this specific branch of the military, the Marines?
It's probably more importantly the impact my mother's friends' kids had on me back then as Marines, and always understanding that the Marine Corps had the best uniform, the best reputation, and that's what I focused on.
What happened when you departed for training camp during your early days of training?
It was pretty interesting because I had lost a lot of my English during the decade I lived in Mexico, so that was my first challenge, was to try to understand the drill instructors, and I was always reacting behind my peers, my fellow recruits in the squad bay. But sooner or later, I caught on, and it started coming back to me like riding a bike, and I got fully back into learning and understanding English all over again.
Do you recall any of your instructors?
Yes, I'll never forget them. My senior drill instructor, Staff Sergeant Smith, drill instructor Staff Sergeant Cababa, he was a Filipino, and drill instructor, he was Sergeant Turner. Great people, changed my life forever. That was the start of the transformation. And I stayed in touch with my senior drill instructor years later in 2002 when I was an E7 gunnery sergeant. He was a retired Chief Warrant Officer. I graduated from one of the mandatory academies from the Marine Corps, and I tracked him down, and he came to my graduation. It was a very emotional moment.
What were your drill instructors like?
Well, Joe Instructor Staff Sergeant Cababa was probably the mean one. He was known as what we call the heavy, the J, depending what coast you go to boot camp. So he was the one that used to raise chaos and hell, along with the junior drill instructors. The senior drill instructor always, that father figure. He came in, but also the guy that if you crossed him the wrong way or you didn't pay attention to what the other drill instructors, he would switch gears on you and really remind you of why you're there and why you should listen. But very significant figures in my life, finished that restructuring that I need, and it was great.
As far as your wartime service, where did you serve, Adrian?
Well, I served in Operation Iraqi Freedom, and I did Iraq. I've also served in South America, back in Colombia. I've served in Korea. I've had the privilege of serving several deployments on ship with my Navy brothers and sisters, where we were in a lot of hot areas across the globe, and we deployed. Had the honor and privilege of having some outstanding Marines and sailors that were on the front lines, and so I'm very grateful to have been given that opportunity.
When you served abroad, what are some of the memories that you have of that experience, Adrian?
It's the camaraderie, how we come together, especially different branches. And when I say not only the branches of the military, I'm talking about how the logistics element, who I was part of most of the time, the ground combat element, who are the infantry folks, and the air combat element, who are our Harriers, our Cobras, all the air support that we needed. And we, on the ship especially, there were 3 or 4 ships together, we go everywhere we go and take care of business.
If you were on the front lines, what combat action did you witness, Adrian?
Never was directly involved in combat, where I had actually returned fire or anything, but did have the Marines and sailors that did. And a lot of them, as I mentioned before, from ship that did hit the ground in many hot areas.
If you're not on the front lines, what were your duties?
Early on, well, when I first came up in the Marine Corps, I was a ammo tech. I'd handle all the ammunition, very important, no matter where it was on ship, on sea, on land. And then I was privileged, had the honor and privilege to become a first sergeant, and I became senior enlisted advisor to the commanders I served under, with the focus of always making sure that our Marines, both enlisted and officers, were taken care of, and our sailors that we served in units where we used to have our sailors as part of our command.
What kinds of friendships and camaraderie did you form while serving, and with whom?
I have to say that I've made a lot of brothers and sisters that we will be forever in touch, and we get together. And one example is that it was when I retired last year, October 2015. Friends came from California. I got friends that came from overseas. Friends that, in the absence of our family, in whatever state, country we're in, we come together and we become family. So we have many of them that me and my wife have met along the way. She was a Marine also, so she really had a lot of friends before I met her.
What do you do for recreation when you're on or off duty?
My biggest thing was always staying in shape, physical fitness, always reading, understanding what we're at, the mission we had at hand. That was my free time, make sure I was as knowledgeable as possible, to make sure that when my junior Marines or junior sailors asked a question, I knew the answer. And a lot of them, when they look at you in distress, looking for the answer, because you are the senior enlisted guy, I wanted to be that man. And if I didn't know it, which there was quite a few times, I wouldn't know where to get the answer. So, and recreationally, like I said, physical fitness, golf, soccer has been another one.
All right, let's talk about the war's end of coming home. Where were you when the war, your time in the service, ended?
We came here back in 2011 is when I got stationed here in the state of Maryland in Baltimore. And that was going to take me to 27 years. I want to say the full 30, but the family wanted to get settled here in Westminster, Maryland. Bought our first home. We always lived in government housing all along throughout my career. So she goes, I don't want to leave no more, so fine, either you retire or find something to do that's going to be here local. So after my mandatory 3 years here in Maryland, I had the honor and privilege to go serve as a foreign military advisor to the Emiratis in UAE. And I did that for 14 months, which I just returned last year, July 2015. And it was a phenomenal experience. A lot of knowledge I had from that country because I've been through there many times through my deployments. And this is home, right here where we're at in Westminster. Mm-hmm.
Okay, you look very sharp, Adrian. Tell us a little bit about all those medals that you have right there that you've accumulated over your 27 years.
I think the one thing I'm really proud of is my meritorious service medals that I've gotten 2 of them. My Navy Marine Corps commendation. You get recognized. I've never been a guy to think about the awards. You just do your job, and things happen. My Navy Achievement Medal, obviously. You'll see my little green and khaki ribbon, which is a part of one of the highlights of my career as a Marine Corps drill instructor. And then we got the Good Conduct Medal too. Like at the Global War on Terrorism Expeditionary and Service Medal. Represents some of the important times and some of the most hectic times the Marine Corps had during this war on terrorism.
Tell us about your achievement with making E9 as far as Senior Master Sergeant.
E9 Sergeant Major in the United States Marine Corps, it's a very, I think when the year I got selected in 2009, it was like a 13-14% selection rate. As you go up in rank in the enlisted side, especially, that funnel gets tighter, and you got to be on top of your game. You got to be the best of the best. And so I always strive to be that. I think the one thing that always worked for me ever since I came in, I've had a couple meritorious promotions along the way, is always staying one rank ahead job-wise. And I did that since I was a young private first class Lance Corporal, and it worked for me all the way, and I made it.
So tell us about your goals when you're still in the military. You say you wanted to be the E9 ever since you were little, I think you were saying.
Yes, I think a lot of the restructuring that happened through my grandparents and in the Marine Corps when I came into boot camp always made me strive to be the best at whatever I do. Never give the bare minimum, and that's one of the biggest things in the Marine Corps. You never want to be a minimalist. I never have been, and I believe because going out that extra mile every single time in everything you do, whether it's physical fitness, being the example, advising commanders, being first where you need to be, and all those little things that kind of add up and had kind of helped me attain the rank that I did.
Tell us about your goals as far as where you are now and what you hope to achieve in your life.
Yes.
The military.
Well, retired on 31 December of 2015, and I wanted to do something where I could serve, if I wasn't going to be around Marines and sailors no more, serve the veterans and their families. And I happened to be at the right place at the right time, and right now I served as the Department Service Officer for the American Legion for the state of Maryland, and I also serve DC and certain parts of Northern Virginia. And I look forward to getting up every single day and being in the office, bringing those veterans in to do their claims, to get the compensation they deserve, hearing the stories that they have. That sometimes I'm there in shock and awe, just hearing what they went through during Vietnam, and a few of the World War II vets that I have the privilege of serving, helping out.
What impact, we talked earlier about Mike Mad Dog Sater, who you worked with. Could you tell us a couple things that you remember of Mike Mad Dog? He passed away in July of 2014.
Yes, well, very, very few interactions, but very well known across the VFW. That was the first organization I got involved with when I first got here, because of people like Mad Dog and a few other veterans that really care about about the cause, about taking care of our veterans and their families. To this day, I stay very in tune with what's going on with the VFW and made some good friends because of Mad Dog. And same thing with the American Legion, and we stand for making sure that our families and our soldiers, Air Forcemen, Coast Guard, no matter what, that we take care of them.
Have you remained in contact with some of your fellow veterans?
Yes, we talk. Thanks to technology nowadays, we're always in touch, whether it's social media, whether it's phone calls. I'm still the traditional. I like to hear voices and talk to my friends over the phone. And time flies. Sometimes we talk for an hour and a half. We have a lot to share, and obviously we have that common thing and things in common, being Marines or being sailors. But they're family. And I think my own family, when they came down to my retirement and saw the interaction that I had with them, with a lot of those folks that I mentioned before, they were like, I cannot believe it, how tight you guys are. I said, that's the way it is.
You said you grew up in Mexico. You lived down and
Yes.
speak Spanish, obviously.
Yes.
Yes. How has that helped you in your military career?
Well, being bilingual has helped out a lot along the way. And I wanted to do a lot more than just be laborers like my parents were, like my grandparents were. They always wanted more for their kids. And I'm the same way. I have 4 of my own, and my beautiful wife of 25 plus years. And we always wanted to do things better and give them more education-wise, all those things that quite possibly, if I didn't really strive for it, I wouldn't have nowadays. I wouldn't be in this uniform. So I think to a certain extent, being a teenager nowadays, like my kids are, a lot of them a little older, it's challenging nowadays. You really got to stay on top of what's going on.
What changes have you seen in the Marine Corps in the last 27 years, if you just elaborate on all the changes that are taking place today?
Well, I think well, coming in back in '89, '90s, it was post Operation Desert Storm, Desert Shield, and everybody that was a quick war, and everybody took a break, and we focused on getting back together and planning for the future, not knowing what was going to come after 2001, and I'm glad that we done that. The Marine Corps didn't just sit on their laurels. We did a lot of planning, a lot of preparation for the worst case scenario, and unfortunately those worst case scenarios did happen. And we are a lot of lessons learned from the last 14 plus years of war, and something tells me we're going to find ourselves in similar areas here in the very near future, and I think we are ready.
How did you readjust to civilian life, Adrian, after the military?
I started early. I started my last couple of years talking to a lot of former senior enlisted officers. He goes, "What do you do? What's the secret?" I'm very high strung, very direct. And I said, "No, you got to take it down a few notches. You got to be able to communicate well. You're not in the Marine Corps no more." And I think by the time it happened, by the time I went on what's called terminal leave in October of last year, 2015, I was ready. I was able to stay low key and personable.
Any regrets
About?
retirement?
Yes, I wanted to stay 30, the full 30. I need 3 more years. But I think the family trumped that. My wife wanted to settle here. We bought our first home, and she loves it here. My kids that moved with me from California love it here. And they just climbed up to #1 spot in my life, and I said, it's time for me to go. It hurt.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, I can understand that. What are some of your life lessons that you learned from the military that you carry on today with your children, your family?
I think some of the biggest things is nothing is ever comes easy, and you got to strive for it. You got to work hard. And like I tell my children, they're at the age of sometimes all they do is know how to ask, and you have to give it to me because you're my father, you're my mother. It's not the way it works, And I sit down with them and I tell them, look, I had to make a decision. I had to leave Chicago for many reasons and get the education I needed because I know I wanted to be a Marine, and I knew what it took to get the high school equivalency education in Mexico, and I went for it. And here I am, decades later. So if anything, being able to pass on that same structure that I had to my children, which I think we've done a phenomenal job, not just by myself, but my wife. She's a special one that always stayed behind while I was deployed, gone all those times, that played mother and father together. And I think it's that perfect team that me and her made that has really gotten our kids ahead.
How has your military service impacted your feelings about war and the military in general?
War, as horrible as it sounds, it's necessary. I mean, we are the greatest nation in the world, and we are the powerful one. And unfortunately, sometimes we have to flex those muscles to make sure that we stay that way, and make sure that those things we cannot say no more that it won't happen in our own country, because it has. And we have to prevent that from ever happening again at whatever expense that's going to be. I understand it's going to cost lives.
Do you think what we're doing today, like with all this terrorist acts, like for example, the other day that was this one Egyptian here, you think we're doing enough to really try to halt this terrorism throughout the world?
I think we are. We are doing enough, and obviously we can't do it all by ourselves. We have our allies that we must rely on, and it's not perfect. There's going to be certain acts, horrible acts, that are going to happen, but I think we've done a very phenomenal job with our allies to minimize that.
Mm-hmm. What message would you like to leave, Adrian, for future generations who hear this interview and view it?
Well, I think the main message I'll leave to the generation, starting with my children and my grandkids, is you got to set goals. You cannot live day to day not knowing what you're going to do tomorrow, whether they're long-term, short-term. I always plan short-term, and I got my long-term goals, and I go for it. You have to stay on top. It might not be perfect. Not all of them may materialize, may not happen. But I think if you give yourself that structure and you go 110% every single day, you'll get there. You'll get to do whatever you want.
What would you like to leave as far as future impacts on future generations here? As far as your military service, your commitment to the country?
Well, I'd like to remind you that not everybody serves, and I understand that, but those that do we need great women, we need great men in the armed forces, especially during these trying times and that we're in right now in 2016, and where we're going to be in the very near future. And then only God knows where we'll be decades from now when my grandkids watch this video, or any other children their age.
How about with women in the military? Are they in the Marine Corps combat Marine women?
Well, we have opened up a lot of the jobs, infantry jobs, to women. Obviously, they got to go through the same training that the men go through, and some have hit the mark. I've met some very motivated, physically fit females that are great people for those roles, and they put to shame a lot of the males. So they're out there, and I applaud their efforts, and we do need them. They're out there doing the FET teams, the female engagement teams in Afghanistan and Iraq. They've been very critical, getting a pulse on what's going on in the villages, in the country. So they've done a phenomenal job, and I've had the honor and privilege of serving a lot of them. Not only Marine Corps wise, I'm talking about Navy, Navy doctors and Navy enlisted also, females.
You talked that you were over in the United Arab Republic. How has that influenced your life as far as seeing the world from a different perspective that you were over there for 14 months?
The United Arab Emirates it's a very I've seen that country grow back when I first came through there in 2006, 2007 to when I was there all of 14 into 15. And I think the biggest thing I take from it is the founding father, Zayed, who developed the country so quick. I mean, the country is only 44 years old, and when you go to places like Dubai and see the structures, the buildings, I mean, they had that vision of not only constructing something, but everything was done for their people. All right, always not to benefit himself or benefit certain people. It was to benefit the whole population. I think we need more of that. the focus on the majority, not just those select few. That's my personal opinion, of course. I think a lot of it, certain periods in my life, in highlights in my career, I think I'm going to start off with, becoming a drill instructor. I always wanted to be one. That was part of my goals too, is not achieving the rank that I'm at, but always becoming a drill instructor. And when I did have that privilege, it was amazing to see just in 12 weeks to bring a platoon of kids, from different backgrounds, different races, and let them come together as one team. That's a lot of work on the drill instructors. We know that the change is going to be forever, and we have to do it right. And the first couple of weeks are very critical to us as we give these young recruits the structure. But come graduation day, I'm a very emotional, sentimental guy. Even though as hardcore as we have to be, I'm still human underneath this uniform. It was always emotional to hand them their Eagle Globe and Anchor at graduation, seeing them break down, and sometimes even jump out of line and hug you and say thank you. It don't get better than that.
How about the memories that you have of some of these recruits that in the 27 years that you've been in the military, of seeing them advance?
Oh,
Talk about that.
That's a very good question. I've had a lot of recruits that are now gunnies. Some are master sergeants, E7s, E8s. Some are Chief One Officer 4s. And I met some that are already, I think they're majors. It's amazing how those, you had something to do with where they're at now. And those thank yous that I get via social media or by email, or when they call me and say, I want to thank you for everything you did back then. That's amazing, and that's unforgettable.
How about some of the memories that you have of the harder times that you had? And let's say you had a recruit that wasn't doing that well, and he turned himself around. Could you talk any about that as far as the difficult times?
Yes, obviously it's never easy. We have those, recruits that just want to give up sometimes, or that they end up getting hurt, and we recycle them, and they know they're not going to come to the same platoon because we have to keep training and moving on. But I used to go visit them while they were in the medical rehabilitation or physical rehabilitation platoons, and keep them motivated, and that's a hard thing to do. And then once they were ready, I would go talk to the drill instructors of the gaining platoon and say, hey, this kid, keep him pumped up, keep him motivated. I think we've done a good job of holding him. I think he's ready to go. And some military life is not for them, and they just realize it when they get there to Parris Island. In my case, that's where I was a drill instructor. Mm-hmm. But we exhaust all means. We want to every kid that volunteers. I believe it's obviously it's a very small percentage of Americans. We want to retain every last one of them, and we exhaust all means between the green belts, the senior drill instructor talking to them, the chief, Sears commander, sometimes even the regimental commander. We do whatever it takes.
Tell us about some of your instances that you've had of, say, somebody that you didn't think was going to make it, and he turned around and went up there. You have any specific instances, Adrian, as far as somebody that didn't think this guy's ever going to make it, and all of a sudden, or gal, and they turned their life around?
I had one of them. He works for a firm in New York, and he was one of my knuckleheads that always, probably where he came from in New York, came from a lot of gangs, brothers and sisters, and he wanted to bring that around, and he was one of the belligerent ones that I always used to get in people's faces, and there was times where we wanted to give up on him and send him away, and I said, no, I see something in this kid, and it took up to the point where I threatened him with dropping him and send him away, and I had to paint a picture of everything he was going to miss if he did that. I said, where are you going back to? I think he was from Brooklyn or some area. I said, are you sure you want to go back to that life? You have the privilege or the opportunity to be somebody that very few in the U.S. get to be, especially the United States Marine. I had to really, to talk about the Marine Corps. And it took him a few hours, 12, 24 hours, and there was a change in him, like, wow, what happened? But it clicked, and he became one of my squad leaders. And I tried to put him as a guide, but he didn't cut he wasn't good, so I just put him as one of my squad leaders. And to this day, he always stays in touch with me. So I think if I had to talk about my special project, he was my special project.
You talked about your uniform, Adrian, as far as being proud of that and everything. Tell us a little bit about how that reflects upon Adrian Gamboa.
Well, every time I wear this, any of my uniforms, Marine Corps uniforms, with honor and pride, and it shows it's a reflection of the hard work I put, to get it. And I think as I tell my wife, and jokingly, I think it's the sexiest uniform in the armed forces, the dress blues and everything. But all I got to say that it was a lot of work to earn this uniform and everything that's on it, and I'm glad that I am one of the few.
Thank you very much. That concludes our interview with Adrian Guadalupe Gamboa.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good job.